You can't dance with that in here. Dana Ashford's voice sliced through the hospital lobby like a scalpel, clean, precise, meant to cut. She stood in heels that probably cost more than Owen's monthly rent, flanked by her assistant and two executives from the new investor group. Her expression held the same sterile disdain as the polished marble beneath their feet. Owen Hale didn't stop twirling the plunger. "Sorry," he said, not because he was sorry, but because his daughter was watching. "Just trying to make my kid laugh." The plunger dipped and spun like a conductor's baton as his 6-year-old daughter, Lila, giggled behind a surgical mask from her wheelchair, her thin fingers clapping against the blanket on her lap. Dana's eyes narrowed. "This is a professional facility. You're a janitor, not a clown." "No," Owen said quietly, stopping the plunger midair. "But I've cleaned up after both." Drop a like if you've ever wanted to stand up to unreasonable rules like this, and subscribe to see how this strategy plays out. The executives glanced at each other. One cracked a grin. Dana didn't. She stepped forward, jaw tight. "Security now. This is unacceptable. You've disrupted a scheduled tour." Her voice droned into the background as Owen turned toward his daughter. He bent down and whispered something that made her eyes crinkle with a smile. Then he stood tall, not confrontational, just still, calm. Like this wasn't his first time being dressed down by someone used to giving orders. He didn't raise his voice, didn't beg, just looked at Dana like she was background noise. His name was Owen Hale, janitor, single father. But behind those eyes was something older, quieter, like the echo of command that used to hold weight in places where silence cost lives. A nurse rolled Lila away gently, eyes avoiding Dana's, while a security officer arrived and asked Owen to step aside. He didn't argue. He just nodded, handed the plunger to the officer with a soft, "Don't lose that, it's my showstopper," and followed without another word. Dana didn't bother watching him leave. Her eyes were back on the investors, smile tightened back in place. Lila's laughter had stopped. The lobby felt colder. He was back that night. Same uniform, same tired eyes, same quiet movements down the long hallway outside pediatric oncology. The mop glided soundlessly along the floor as he paused outside room 217, Lila's room. The lights were dimmed inside, but her silhouette was clear, curled around a stuffed bear missing one eye. Owen crouched beside his cart and checked the clipboard attached to his mop bucket. It wasn't for cleaning notes. It was her vitals chart. He had copied it himself, every day. Not because he didn't trust the doctors, but because habits die hard, especially when your child is involved. Across the hallway, a young nurse fumbled with an IV machine, muttering. Owen watched, silently counting the error in her drip rate. When she walked away, he stepped over and adjusted it without touching the screen. A quiet motion. Exact. Back in his cart pocket, under the industrial wipes and gloves, was a weathered leather wallet with an ID he hadn't used in years. Dr. Owen Hale, Chief of Pediatric Trauma, Mercy West Regional. He never showed it anymore, not because he couldn't, but because life had shifted him to a different kind of triage, one where he didn't need scalpels, just proximity to a girl whose laugh made everything else survivable. And this place let him stay close. He'd take the mop over the scalpel if it meant being near her. But the woman in heels who called security like he was a roach. She'd just picked the wrong janitor to humiliate in front of his daughter. "Where are you watching from? Tell me, has anyone ever underestimated you just because of your uniform? Stay with me. Because this story isn't about the plunger or the dance or the power she thought she had. It's about what happens when crisis knocks and the only person who can answer is the one they told to stay quiet." The floors gleamed by morning. Owen worked in silence, as always. A few nurses passed with polite nods. None mentioned what had happened the day before. That was the code in places like this. Shame gets buffed out with ammonia and wax, swept beneath talk of efficiency and patient rounds. He didn't expect an apology. He didn't need one. The real damage wasn't to his job. It was in Lila's eyes the night before, how the light dimmed when she watched him get led away. He'd spent hours beside her afterward, reading her favorite chapter from The Secret Garden and reminding her why he danced like a fool in the first place. To make her forget she couldn't run. To make her forget what her lungs couldn't hold. The next morning, he was assigned to the executive corridor on floor 14. He kept his head down, gliding the mop in even strokes, counting door plates in his mind like a rhythm he'd never quite forgotten. He didn't mean to see Dana again, but fate always had a way of looping back to the people who needed humbling. Her voice drifted into the hall before she appeared, tight, clipped syllables barking through her Bluetooth headset. "Yes, but Max will be fine. I've already arranged for the pediatric team to keep him on IV fluids during the pitch. No distractions. I need this funding round to close." She turned the corner. Her heels echoed off the pristine floor. She walked right past Owen without a glance. Max trailed behind her. The boy looked pale, thinner than last week, his shoulders slumped in a blazer too stiff for his frame. His lips were dry, and his eyes darted with a disoriented edge that Owen recognized instantly. Something wasn't right. There was a tremor in Max's fingers. Dana didn't notice. "Come on," she called over her shoulder. "Stand up straight. Investors aren't swayed by sick kids." Owen paused mid-mop. He glanced at Max again, measured the skin tone, watched the balance in his gait, saw the flutter in the boy's chest. Subtle. But not subtle to someone trained to see cardiac misfires before they screamed. Something tight coiled in Owen's chest, but he kept his face unreadable. "You," Dana said suddenly, turning to him, "you've missed a spot near the glass wall. If you're done wasting time in the lobby, maybe earn your wages." He didn't flinch, just nodded, lowered his gaze, and said, "Yes, ma'am." But as she passed, Max stumbled. His knee buckled. Dana caught his arm, annoyed more than alarmed. Owen moved without thinking. He crossed the space in 2 long strides, steadying Max's elbow. His fingers gently pressed the boy's wrist for a pulse. "Hey," he said, low and calm. "You dizzy?" Max blinked at him, lips parting. "Feels weird." "Heart racing?" Owen asked, already shifting the boy's weight against his side. "Yeah, and my chest." "Stop," Dana snapped. "You're not qualified to—" Owen looked up, eyes sharp but measured. "Your son's heart rhythm is irregular. He needs to lie down. Now." Dana's mouth opened to fire back, but Max sagged against Owen's side. His skin was clammy. Owen didn't wait for permission. He eased the boy down against the corridor wall, head elevated. Then he looked up at Dana again. "Get a nurse," he said. She hesitated, caught between pride and panic. Then she turned on her heel and vanished around the corner. Owen exhaled slowly. His fingers hovered gently over Max's carotid, counting the rhythm with practiced silence. Too fast, too shallow. This wasn't just dehydration. This was something the pediatric team should have caught days ago. "You're okay," Owen whispered. "Stay with me, kid. Just breathe." Max nodded weakly. His breath stuttered, but his panic eased under Owen's steady voice. Down the hall, nurses and aides rushed toward them. Dana reappeared behind them, eyes wide. The Bluetooth headset was gone. The pediatric team surrounded Max, voices overlapping. Someone asked for a crash cart, another for vitals. A nurse turned to Owen. "What happened?" Owen stood, brushing off his uniform. "Possible paroxysmal tachycardia, maybe arrhythmia. Check his QT interval." The nurse blinked. Dana did too. Owen met her stare. "Your son didn't need a stage," he said. "He needed a doctor." Then he picked up his mop and walked away. Max's faint voice called after him. "Thanks." Owen didn't answer, but the rhythm of his steps echoed something steady. The code was changing, and the people who had pretended not to see him, they wouldn't forget him now. He didn't talk about what happened. Not to the other janitors who shared the break room, not to the nurse who gave him a double take that evening, not even to Lila, though she must have felt something. Had shifted. She always did. That night, as she curled under her soft fleece blanket in room 217, Owen sat at her bedside, like he always did, one hand resting on hers. Silent. Still. She asked about his dance. He smiled and told her he'd retired the plunger for now. But down the hallway, a buzz had started. Nothing loud, nothing formal. Just sideways glances, murmured questions. "Isn't that the janitor who—" He knew exactly what to do before the doctors did. "Did you see the way he handled it? Like he'd done it 100 times. The pediatric nurse from that morning, Ray, looked up his name during a lull in her shift. Owen Hale. No advanced credentials listed on his badge. No doctor title. Just facilities maintenance. But something didn't add up. She pulled older hospital records, databases most wouldn't check. And there it was, from another state, 8 years back. Dr. Owen Hale, Chief of Pediatric Trauma, Mercy West Regional, published, decorated, resigned suddenly. She stared at the screen, lips parted, then glanced toward the floor, outside room 217. He was there, quiet as always, cleaning baseboards no one else would have noticed. Later that shift, Ray passed the break room, hesitated, and stepped inside. Owen was alone, refilling the mop solution under the hum of the flickering fluorescent bulb. "You didn't list your credentials when you got hired here," she said. Owen didn't look up. "Didn't need to. You could be working upstairs." "I am upstairs." She paused. "You saved that boy's life." He finally looked at her, tired, calm, not angry, just resolved. "I'm where I need to be." That was all he said. By the next morning, Dana's inbox was clogged with internal messages, some polite, some not. The head of pediatrics wanted a meeting. HR requested clarification on Owen's background screening. The chief of staff asked whether they were at risk of losing someone with historical field credentials. And then came the article. A junior comms intern at the hospital, browsing medical forums for engagement content, found an old story. Dr. Owen Hale's Miracle Protocols in Pediatric Field Trauma. The piece described a mass casualty scenario where Owen had triaged and saved 8 children after a bus accident. His methods had become standard in rural ERs. The intern forwarded it to her manager. Her manager forwarded it to the hospital's media director. The media director called Dana. "We might be sitting on a PR goldmine," she said. "We can't have this go public before we own the narrative. What's our angle?" Dana's eyes flicked to the marble floor, where she'd once stood and called security on him without hesitation. Own the narrative? She wasn't sure she could even explain it to herself yet. Later that afternoon, she walked down to the basement level, not because she had to, but because no one else could answer the questions brewing inside her. Owen was in the supply closet, reloading gloves into labeled bins. The room smelled of bleach and lavender disinfectant. "You didn't list your full history when you applied," she said. He didn't flinch, didn't stop stacking. "No. You were a lead trauma surgeon." "Was. You knew exactly what to do when Max—" "I've seen that kind of episode before. Early signs are usually missed." Silence stretched between them. Dana folded her arms. "Why here? Why mops and drains when you could be doing—" "Lila," he said simply. "She needs me close. After the accident, she was never the same, and I couldn't trust myself not to freeze again." Dana blinked. He turned, voice quieter now. "When it's your own kid on the table, everything you know vanishes. I failed once. I won't again." She didn't have a reply, because for all her power, her degrees, her elegance, she hadn't seen what he saw in Max, hadn't even asked. She was too busy preparing the right angles for investors. "I want to offer you a formal position," she said finally. "Consulting at least. Recognition." Owen shook his head. "I don't need a title. I need access to room 217, and enough quiet to be a good father." She watched him close the cabinet door. The mop cart waited behind him, like a loyal shadow. He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't need it. And that, somehow, left her with more shame than if he'd yelled. Max was kept overnight for monitoring. It wasn't part of Dana's plan. The investor dinner was canceled, the board meeting postponed. She'd barely explained it, just said Max needed rest, and then stopped answering follow-ups altogether. For the first time in weeks, her schedule was empty. She stood in the doorway of his private suite, watching his small frame curled beneath sterile white sheets, heart monitor tracing every beat she'd nearly ignored. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't asleep. "I didn't know you were that sick," she said, almost to herself. Max stirred. "Neither did I." She came closer, smoothing the blanket like she used to when he was younger. Before the speeches, before the handshakes, before she built her life around being unshakable. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You don't like sick things," he mumbled, then added quickly. "Not people." Just, you always look mad when I don't feel good. The words lodged in her throat. She sat in the chair beside him and tried not to show how much they hurt. Mom, that janitor. Dana's shoulders tensed. He wasn't scared, Max whispered. Everyone else looked scared, but he didn't. She remembered the moment, the chaos, the frozen staff, her own voice cracking in panic, and Owen kneeling like it was just another day. No trembling hands, no theatrics, just focus, care. He used to be a doctor, she said quietly. Max blinked. Is he still one? Dana hesitated. I think he still is, just not the way you think. Downstairs, Owen was replacing broken tiles along the hallway outside radiology. No one asked him to. No one noticed they were cracked, not really. But he had, and that was enough. He didn't need the uniform to matter. His days were measured in Lila's smiles and lab results. But still, something had shifted. The glances were different now. The silence in elevators came with curiosity. People who never spoke before now nodded when he passed. Not respect, not yet. But something like awareness. Ray passed him mid-shift, stopped, then turned. I heard Dana's office asked about your original license. Owen didn't look up. It's expired. She's asking if you'd consider reinstatement. He stood slowly, pressing a knee to release the stiffness in his back. Not interested. Ray crossed her arms. You know they think this is noble, the whole janitor hero father thing. They're trying to figure out how to spin it. I'm not a headline. I know. She paused. But you might be the reason they stopped treating people like background noise. Owen sighed. I didn't come here to start a movement. No, but maybe it started anyway. That night, he brought Lila a small fruit cup from the cafeteria. She was drowsy from medication, her eyelids fluttering. Were you really a doctor? She asked as he adjusted her pillows. I was. Why don't you be one again? Because I'm your dad now. She thought about that, then nodded like it made perfect sense. He smiled and kissed her forehead. Besides, it's easier to sneak fruit cups in as a janitor. She giggled. He lived for that sound. Upstairs, Dana stared at her monitor. It displayed security footage from the lobby. Her assistant had sent the time-stamped clip. Owen kneeling beside Max, giving quiet orders as professionals stumbled behind him. No panic, just precision. In the background, you could see her. Frozen, powerless. The footage cut off right as Max whispered, "Thank you." She didn't replay it. Instead, she looked across her desk at the framed plaque that had always comforted her. Lead with certainty. Win with control. She turned it face down. Later that week, a memo circulated through the hospital. All staff recognition initiative to elevate unseen contributors. New badges would be implemented, displaying employee names and stories. A wall in the lobby would be dedicated to those who'd gone unrecognized, not just medical heroes, custodians, aides, tech staff, every department. There was no mention of Owen's name. But when the glass case was installed, the first item placed inside wasn't a trophy. It was a plunger, bright red handle, slightly bent rubber cup, resting beside a laminated note, for the laugh that saved a moment, and the man who didn't need applause to do what mattered. Owen saw it 2 days later on his way to clock out. He didn't smile, didn't pause, but he did stop just long enough to adjust the angle of the handle, and then he walked on, mop trailing behind him like a banner nobody saw until they needed it. Owen never said a word about the wall. He passed it twice a day now, once during morning rotations when the floor was quiet, and once at closing when the last nurses scribbled notes with aching hands. The plunger remained in the case, angled slightly downward as if bowing. Visitors stopped to read the note. Some smiled, some looked confused, but it wasn't for them anyway. Ray was the first to approach him about it. You saw what they put up, right? I saw it. You okay with that? He looked at her and gave a half smile. I've been called worse than a man with a plunger. You know they're trying to turn it into a narrative. I'm not a story, he said. I'm just her dad. And that was the truth of it. Everything else, his name, his past, his credentials, had been folded neatly away the day he carried Lila out of the ER, wrapped in his jacket, whispering apologies to a ghost who couldn't answer back. But stories have a way of resurfacing, especially when silence surrounds them too long. 3 days later, during lunch hour, a stranger approached him in the staff cafe. "You're Owen Hale, right?" He looked up. The man wore a visitor's badge and a dark blazer, slick hair, expensive watch. "I'm with the board, Henry Wallingford. We've been hearing a lot about you." Owen didn't respond. "I've been asked to extend an invitation. Dana wants you to attend a leadership roundtable next week. They're exploring cross-disciplinary crisis response models, and I'm not interested." The man blinked. "You're a janitor." "That's right. You do realize what this opportunity could mean?" Owen stood up, tray in hand. "I do. That's why I'm saying no." Henry stared at him, expression unreadable. "You're turning down a seat at a table people spend their lives fighting to earn." Owen's voice was calm. "I already had a seat at the table, and I left it?" He dumped his tray and walked out. The next morning, Owen was refilling the supply caddy near pediatrics when Max rounded the corner alone. He looked better, less pale, more alert. A thick sketch pad clutched in his arms. "You're hard to find," Max said. Owen looked up. "You doing okay?" Max nodded. "They said I'm going to wear a monitor now. It's small, feels weird." "You'll get used to it. It's a smart move." "I made something." Max opened the sketch pad to a pencil drawing. A superhero in scrubs with a mop for a staff and a plunger on his back like a sword. The figure was kneeling, steadying a small child wrapped in a blanket. At the bottom, in big block letters, "Janitor Man saves the day quietly." Owen stared at it for a long moment. Then he knelt beside Max and ruffled his hair. "You've got talent, kid. My mom said you used to be a doctor. I did. Why aren't you one now?" Owen hesitated. "Because sometimes, when you lose something important, you change. Doesn't mean you stop helping people, just means you help them differently." Max nodded slowly, then flipped the page to another sketch. This time, the lobby scene. Dana stood frozen, phone in hand, while Owen knelt beside Max. Everyone else in the picture looked blurry, like shadows. That afternoon, Max's drawing ended up on Dana's desk, left without explanation. She stared at it for a long time. There were no captions, no labels. Just expressions, hers blank, Owen focused, Max at peace. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out Owen's employee file. The original resume, stripped bare, just janitorial history, basic ID, and a line at the bottom. Reason for interest, flexible hours close to pediatric ward. No demands, no ego, no hint of who he had been. She reached for her phone. 2 rings. "Chief Stanford? Can you meet me in conference room C? I think we need to talk about structural role integration." "Yes, it's about Hale." Later that night, Owen sat at Lila's bedside as she struggled through another coughing fit. He held the oxygen tube steady, rubbing her back with careful rhythm. "You were on the news," she whispered. "I was?" "Yeah, Ray showed me. They talked about you helping that boy. They said you used to be a big deal." "I still am," he said. "To you." She smiled weakly. "I like the dance better than the doctor stuff." "Me too." He reached into his cart and pulled out something he hadn't used since that day. The red plunger. He twirled it once slowly, with exaggerated care, then placed it by her feet like a royal scepter. And for the first time all week, Lila laughed again. Down the hallway, the hospital lights dimmed for evening shift. But outside room 217, the floors still shined. Not because someone asked, but because Owen Hale had already cleaned messes no one else could see. The storm hit just after midnight. Not the kind of storm that rattles windows or floods parking lots, but the kind that descends in quiet code blues, hushed footsteps, and monitor alarms that pierce sterile silence. Owen had just finished mopping the second-floor corridor when the call came through the overhead system. "Pediatric emergency, room 215, immediate response." Room 215 was too close to 217, too close to Lila. He left the mop against the wall and moved with purpose, not running, not panicked, but with the same ghost walk he used to perform in emergency wings. When he reached the corner, he saw Ray already wheeling the crash cart into the room. Maximum. He was on the floor beside his bed. An oxygen tube lay tangled near his feet, heart monitor flatlining in wild static before stabilizing again in an erratic rhythm. Dana was there, kneeling, her blazer wrinkled, her hair undone, hands trembling over her son's wrist. He said he felt fine. I just stepped out for 1 minute. He... Her words fractured. Panic had peeled her clean. Ray was trying to check vitals, but Max was barely responsive. Another nurse fumbled to find the right dosage. Someone reached for the crash protocol tablet. Owen didn't ask permission. He stepped past them all. "Move," he said, not loudly but with a force that cleared the room. He dropped to one knee, fingers already at Max's neck, counting pulses. He touched the boy's sternum, felt the skipped beats, and then pressed his ear close. Ray froze. "Owen!" "SVT again," he said. "Onset spike. No breath retention. Possible secondary misfire. We need vagal stimulation. Now. Someone get cold compresses. Ice, not gel." He looked to the younger nurse. "Tilt his head back. 30 degrees. Exactly." The nurse moved, shaking. Dana just stared. Owen leaned in, whispered something to Max, then pressed 2 fingers at the boy's temple and sternum in a rhythm that looked more like prayer than medicine. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't rise. And then Max coughed, a hard, ragged sound, followed by a slow inhale. Then another. The monitor's beeping returned, steady, unsure, but alive. Ray exhaled sharply. Pulse stabilizing, oxygen saturation climbing. Owen leaned back and finally looked at Dana. "You need to update his treatment plan. Now, he's not out of danger. That episode didn't start tonight. It started days ago." Dana's mouth moved, but no words came. She looked like someone pulled from rubble, alive, but wrecked. Ray took over. Another nurse stepped in to reset the monitor. The chaos dissolved into protocol again, but Dana remained kneeling, eyes on her son's chest, rising and falling. Owen stood. He turned to leave, but Dana reached out. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. "How?" she whispered. "How did you know what to do? You weren't even supposed to be on this floor." He paused. "I never stopped being a doctor," he said. "I just stopped being allowed to call myself one." Then he walked out. In the hallway, the silence hit him harder than the adrenaline. He leaned against the wall for just a moment, just long enough to steady his own breathing. Ray joined him, arms folded. "You just saved him again." He didn't reply. "Dana knows now. Everyone will. There's no hiding anymore." Owen looked down the corridor toward room 217. "I didn't want this to be about me. But it is now." That morning, before the first shift began, Dana called a closed-door meeting in the executive conference room. The department heads, board liaisons, legal, and HR were all present. She stood at the head of the long table. No slides, no notes. "There's a man working in this building who saved my son's life twice," she began. "You all know who I'm talking about." A few exchanged glances. No one interrupted. "He's not on the medical staff. He doesn't carry a pager or wear a lab coat. But when our procedures failed, he didn't. When we panicked, he didn't." Her voice wavered just once. "I treated him like he didn't belong here, because of a mop, because of a title." She placed her hands on the table. "As of today, Owen Hale is to be reinstated as a medical consultant to this hospital, with the option to reclaim full licensure if he chooses. He'll have complete access to our pediatric review board and the discretion to train, mentor, or remain in his current role as he sees fit." HR raised a hand. "Will this be part of a PR initiative?" "No," Dana said. "This is not about publicity. This is about restoring dignity." And then, softer. "And admitting I was wrong." Outside, the hallway lights flickered back to full brightness. In room 217, Lila opened her eyes to find her father still asleep in the chair beside her bed, arms folded, breathing steady. For now, that was all the title he needed. The offer came in a sealed envelope. Owen found it taped neatly to his locker. No fanfare, just a manila square with his name in ink, and the hospital's insignia embossed on the flap. Inside, an official reinstatement letter from the board, co-signed by Dana Ashford and Chief Stanford, granting him full access to review panels, optional licensure re-entry support, and a consulting role with immediate effect. He read it once, then again. Then he folded it and placed it beneath the folded paper crane Lila had made for him from an old prescription sheet. He didn't throw the letter away, but he didn't respond either. He wasn't ready. That afternoon, Dana came to him directly. No blazer this time, no entourage. Just her, holding a coffee in one hand and looking like she'd rehearsed the conversation all the way down the elevator. "Thank you," she said. Owen looked up from the supply inventory he was sorting. "For?" "For Max, for doing what no one else could. Twice." He nodded once. "You're welcome." A silence stretched between them, not cold, but weighted. "I meant what I said," Dana continued. "The hospital wants you back, not for PR, not for optics, for what you know, what you see." He held her gaze. "I'm not here to be remembered for one moment. I'm here for my daughter." Dana took a breath, then placed the coffee on the nearby cart. "Then we'll work around her, whatever hours, whatever structure. You set the terms." That stopped him. She'd come not as an executive this time, but as a mother who would watch someone keep her child breathing. "I'm not interested in wearing a title again," he said. She nodded. "Then don't wear one, but let people learn from you. Let them see what medicine looks like when it isn't afraid." That night, Lila's cough returned. Not dangerously, but enough to stir her awake. Owen sat beside her, gently rubbing her back in circles until she settled again. She opened her eyes just enough to whisper, "Did you dance today?" He smiled. "Not yet." "I think that's why the hospital's been grumpy," she said. He laughed softly. She coughed again, then curled closer into her blanket. "I like you better with the mop." He stared at her for a long time, then whispered, "Me too." But the next morning, when he arrived at work, the mop was missing from his cart. In its place was a folded lab coat, clean, crisp. A simple white jacket with no embroidery, just a small note pinned to the collar. "If you ever want both, there's room." He stood there for a while, holding it. Then he walked upstairs. Across the hospital, word had spread. Staff who once looked past him now looked twice. The maintenance crews gave him a wide berth, unsure of whether he was one of them anymore. The nurses nodded in greeting, awkward but respectful. In the pediatric wing, Max waited near the common room, with something hidden behind his back. When Owen passed, Max held out a folded page torn from his sketch pad. "I drew another one," he said shyly. This one showed a hallway, bright, clean, with kids laughing. In the center stood a tall figure with a mop in one hand and a stethoscope in the other. Behind him, two doors, room 215 and room 217. The figure stood between them. "Is this me?" Owen asked. Max nodded. "Looks like you gave me both jobs." "I think you were both the whole time." Owen placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're smarter than people give you credit for." "So are you," Max said, then added, "That's why people don't know what to do with you." Owen smiled. "That's okay, I do." By week's end, Dana hosted a town hall for staff. No cameras, no announcements to the public, just a quiet gathering in the main auditorium. She took the podium, but only spoke for a minute. "This institution runs on more than medicine. It runs on people, and sometimes the ones who save us don't wear the badges we expect. So today we start something different." She gestured to the side. Ray stepped forward, holding a new kind of ID badge. It bore a silver border instead of blue. No title. Just a name, a photo, and a simple banner beneath. Trusted presence. Not for hierarchy, not for rank. But for those whose knowledge and presence changed outcomes, even if they did it with a mop in their hand. Dana didn't name him. She didn't have to. Everyone turned when Owen entered the room, walking beside Ray with the badge clipped to his belt. Not over his chest, not like armor, but like a compass pointing home. And the white coat. Still folded, still unworn. But in his locker now, just in case. The hospital felt different now. Not because of policy memos or hallway banners, but because silence had started to shift. When Owen walked the halls, people made space, not out of fear, not from reverence, but recognition. Some nodded, some looked away, still unsure how to regard a man who lived in two worlds. But no one dismissed him anymore. Dana's initiative had launched quietly, but taken hold fast. Trusted presence badges began to show up on unexpected people, Longtime security officers who'd intervened with compassion, cafeteria staff who had learned the dietary codes of chronically ill children by heart, even a transport orderly who'd once stabilized a panicked patient in a stalled elevator. And always at the center of it, whether he asked to be or not, was Owen. Ray joined him in the staff cafe that Tuesday morning, sliding into the seat across from him with a coffee and a clipboard. "You're being petitioned," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." She handed him the form. "Medical residents want you to lead a shadowing module. No procedures, just observations. Crisis response, real-time learning. I'm not licensed. They know, doesn't matter." He looked at the names, 17 signatures. One of them had drawn a small Plunger sketch in the corner. "I didn't ask for this," he murmured. Ray gave him a long look. "That's exactly why they trust you." He folded the form and tucked it under his coffee cup. "Let me think about it." Later that day, he found himself outside room 215. Max had been discharged, but left a stack of drawings taped above the headboard. One showed a cape made from cleaning rags. Another was a parody of a hospital badge that read, "Plunger Certified." Owen smiled, but quietly. When he turned around, Dana was standing behind him. "I talked to Max's new pediatric specialist," she said. "They were impressed by how much he understood his condition." "That's mostly him. He's observant." "He told them he wants to become a doctor." Owen paused. "That doesn't surprise me." She hesitated. "He said he wants to help people quietly, like you." Owen let that settle between them. Then, "You came down here just to tell me that?" Dana nodded. "And to say I've recommended you for the mentorship program formally. I've cleared the licensure pathway if you ever want it again. You wouldn't have to fight the board, not this time." He looked at her for a moment, then asked, "Why?" "Because I think it matters that the next generation sees more than authority in action. They need to see integrity in silence." Owen leaned against the doorframe. "Then let me teach from here." She blinked. "You're turning down the code again?" He nodded once. "The title never made me a doctor. The work did. And Lila's not done needing me down here." Dana didn't argue. She just nodded slowly and said, "Then I'll make sure no one stands in your way again." That evening, he returned to room 217 with a soft cup of mango jelly, Lila's favorite. She was sitting upright, sketching something on a hospital menu with a crayon. "Hey," he said, offering the jelly. She took it with a smile. "Did you see the new badges? Mine says I'm the chief of coloring." He laughed. "That sounds like a pretty serious role." She nodded solemnly. "Ray said I should start a council." He sat beside her. "What would this council do?" "Make sure people like you don't get yelled at for dancing." He smiled but said nothing. She returned to her sketch. After a few minutes, she handed it to him. It was the hospital lobby again, but brighter than before. The marble floor sparkled. The people weren't blurred. They were smiling. And at the center stood Owen, mop in one hand, stethoscope draped around his neck. Lila had drawn a badge on his chest. Not white, not silver. It was gold. Underneath, she'd written in purple crayon, "My dad, trusted forever." He folded the drawing carefully, then tucked it into his wallet, next to the old ID from Mercy West. Not to replace it, but because it meant more. By the end of the week, the mentorship program launched. Owen didn't take a title. He didn't wear the white coat, but he started holding short morning rounds for anyone who showed up. Custodians, techs, nurses, interns. He walked them through case responses, empathy-driven decisions, what to do when no one else was moving. And always he ended the session with the same words. Titles don't save people. Awareness does. Presence does. Quiet does. And the hospital, at last, had learned how to listen. The mentorship rounds grew quietly. Each morning, before shift change, a small circle would gather outside the pediatric ward. Nurses clutching coffee, new residents holding notebooks, even a few custodial staff standing in scrubs with curious eyes. Owen didn't lecture. He walked and talked, pointing out what others overlooked. The slight hitch in a child's gait, the hesitancy in a parent's handshake, the pause before a monitor beeped wrong. He never spoke like a teacher. He just noticed things out loud. Sometimes, it's not the chart that tells you something's off. "It's the shoes," he said once, pointing to a toddler's mismatched slippers. "One foot swells when she's in pain. She won't say it, but she'll wear the looser shoe." People listened, they took notes, and slowly, he became something no badge could define. That afternoon, Dana watched from the edge of the hallway as Owen explained the subtleties of respiratory fatigue to two interns, using only a whiteboard and a crayon, drawing Lila had left taped to the wall. She said nothing, but she stayed until the group disbanded, then approached. "You were right," she said. Owen raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Presence. It changes more than policy ever could." He gave a slight nod. "Policies live on paper. Presence lives in the gaps." She paused, then gestured toward the pediatric conference room. "There's something I'd like you to see." Inside, the table had been cleared except for a small model on display, an early rendering of a proposed community pediatric wing, built for high-access care, sensory-friendly design, and long-term recovery. On the side of the model, etched in placeholder letters, the HAIL unit, Integrated Family Care Wing. Owen stared at it, not with pride, not with protest, but with quiet disbelief. "I didn't approve this." "You didn't have to," Dana said. "The board did. Every name gets attached to a wing eventually, usually because of donations. This one's because of actions. I'm not interested in being honored. It's not about honor, it's about memory. This will serve families like yours, people who fall through cracks too narrow to measure." He was silent. Then he turned and walked out, not rudely, but without another word. She didn't follow. That evening, he sat beside Lila again. She was coloring with deep focus, tongue poking from the side of her mouth. Her fourth line looped around her wrist like a bracelet, now routine. He handed her a small snack cup, and she opened it without looking up. "They're naming a building after you," she said casually. He blinked. "How do you know that?" "Ray told me. She thinks it's cool." "What do you think?" She paused, then shrugged. "Buildings are boring. You should have a park instead. With swings?" He laughed. "Swings don't carry titles." "They don't need to," she replied, as if that settled it. He watched her for a while, the child who made him trade scalpels for scrubbing pads, who taught him how to show up without noise, and who, somehow, always saw right through him. "Would you be okay if I taught some people?" he asked gently. Like class?" "Kind of. About how to help, how to notice." She considered it, then nodded. "As long as you still dance sometimes." "Deal." The following week, the first formal presence practice course launched, a rotating seminar for all levels of staff, medical and non-medical, centered around situational awareness, silent triage, and trauma-informed communication. Owen led it once a week in the old basement conference room, a quiet space filled mostly with folding chairs and a single coffee urn. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked, because when he spoke, they didn't hear a teacher, they heard a father, and that was enough. Dana attended the first session in the back row. She didn't speak, she didn't stay long, but she left a note on the table when she left. "For the record, present saved my son, and now it's changing our hospital." He read it once, then folded it into the same wallet pocket where he kept Lila's sketch. He never did wear the white coat. It remained folded in his locker, untouched, but the badge, trusted presence, stayed clipped to his belt, where it caught the light every time he bent to clean, or comfort, or teach. And the mop, still used it, still loved it, still danced with it, just a little, every time Lila watched from the hall, because no matter what they called him now, he knew exactly who he was. The complaint came in on a Monday, a typed letter, unsigned, slid into the anonymous HR inbox. It accused Owen of blurred boundaries, claimed he distracted staff from certified procedures, and hinted that certain staff were receiving informal privileges due to personal tragedies. No specific event was cited, just insinuation, carefully worded, designed to wound without names. HR called him in the next day. Owen read the letter silently, then placed it flat on the table. "I'm not surprised," he said. The HR director looked up. "You think you know who wrote it?" "I don't need to. I know what it's trying to do." "And what's that?" "Pull me back into a box." The director, an older man named Virgil, nodded slowly. "The board doesn't see it that way. Dana's been clear. So has the chief of staff. This isn't disciplinary. Then what is it? A reminder that some people still don't understand what you are. Owen leaned back in his chair. That's not new. Virgil slid the letter aside. We're not investigating. We're not issuing warnings. But we thought you should know what still floats through the cracks. Owen stood. Thank you. Before he reached the door, Virgil called out, For what it's worth. Most of us see what you've built here. The way people wait when you speak. The way Max looks at you. That's not soft influence. That's earned. Owen didn't turn around. He just said, Then make sure the people behind letters like this never teach the next generation. And he left. Later that day, he returned to room 217 early. Lila had been sleeping more often, the treatments heavier now, the fatigue more stubborn. She stirred when he pulled the curtain back and smiled faintly. Are you okay? She asked, voice barely above a breath. I am, he said. Are you? She nodded, then whispered, I had a dream. Tell me. You were wearing a cape made of mop strings, and they gave you a crown made from coffee lids. He chuckled. Sounds uncomfortable. It looked right on you. Her eyes closed again. Owen sat beside her, holding her hand. The machines hummed softly, rhythmic and steady. Outside the window, the sky had turned gold. For a moment, he let his shoulders drop, let the exhaustion show on his face. And then he heard the knock. Ray stood in the doorway, holding a small envelope. From Max, she said. Inside was a folded note in shaky kid handwriting. They tried to say you shouldn't teach, but I told them if you stopped, then I stopped coming to class. Below it was a second page, another drawing, this time of Owen standing in front of a class filled with both kids and adults, all seated cross-legged on the floor. Behind him was a whiteboard that read, Step 1, notice. Step 2, care. Step 3, be quiet and show up anyway. Owen looked up at Ray. He's stubborn. He learned it from someone. By Thursday, word of the anonymous complaint had reached the volunteer office, then the nurses' station, then the resident chat groups. And by Friday morning, the same conference room where Owen ran his sessions had filled beyond capacity. People stood along the walls, some sat cross-legged on the floor. One of the janitors brought a thermos of extra coffee. A respiratory therapist handed out hand-printed stickers that read, Presence First. Owen entered the room and paused at the threshold. I didn't ask anyone to be here. Ray, seated in the back, called out, That's why we are. He looked around the room, then quietly said, Let's begin. No one mentioned the complaint again. At the end of the session, Dana approached him. She waited until the others had filtered out, then closed the door behind her. I'm issuing a permanent override, she said. Any anonymous letters against your mentorship program come straight to me, no filters. He met her gaze. Won't that make people nervous? Only the ones who aren't listening. She set down a small box and opened it. Inside, a worn leather nameplate from a decommissioned exam room. The plaque read, Dr. Owen Hale, Pediatric Trauma Specialist. We found it in the archives, Dana said. Figured it deserved to be returned. Owen stared at it for a long time, then quietly said, That part of me's gone. No, she replied. It's just bigger now. He closed the box and nodded once. As Dana turned to leave, she added, The new family wing? We've renamed it. He raised an eyebrow. She smiled. It's not just the Hale wing anymore. She paused in the doorway, then said, It's the presence wing. And for the first time in a long time, Owen Hale didn't have anything to say. He just breathed in. The official unveiling came 2 weeks later. No red ribbons, no press. Just a quiet gathering in the newly renovated lobby where the sunlight pooled across the polished tile and caught the edge of the glass case, the one that still held the old plunger, angled like a sentinel. The hospital had added a small plaque beneath it now, in honor of those who showed up when titles stepped back. Owen didn't stand at the front. He stayed to the side, beside Ray and the janitorial crew, all dressed in their work uniforms like any other day. Lila sat beside him in her wheelchair, bundled in a new yellow cardigan, watching with bright eyes, even as fatigue weighed on her shoulders. Dana stepped up to the mic, her voice steady but softer than it once had been. This hospital has always measured value in outcomes, in credentials, in metrics, but something changed. We began measuring presence, and what we found was that sometimes the strongest interventions are the quietest. She gestured behind her, toward the etched glass doors now, bearing the new name, the Presence Wing, family-centered care and compassionate learning. The crowd didn't erupt in applause. That wasn't the atmosphere. It was quieter, respectful, grounded, the kind of silence that listens. Owen felt Lila squeeze his hand. "Is it weird," she whispered, "that your name isn't on it anymore?" He looked down at her. "No," he said, "it's better this way." Because it wasn't about him, not really. It never had been. That evening, Owen walked the new halls of the Presence Wing. The design was simple: curved corners, soft lighting, chairs built for actual comfort, walls filled with framed drawings from children who had stayed there. One of Lila's was on the far wall, a rainbow with feet instead of clouds, walking across a field of stars. He paused beside it, noticing how it was hung slightly off-center. A hand reached past him and straightened it. "Had a feeling you'd be here," Dana said. "I wanted to see it before it fills." She nodded. "We're already getting referrals, families with kids like Lila, staff looking for a more human rotation. Word spreads." Owen looked around. "It doesn't feel like a hospital wing." "That's the point." They stood in silence, both watching the drawing. Then Dana said, "I think Max wants to write a book." Owen smiled. "About what?" "About you, about showing up, about not needing a title to make a difference." "He should write it," Owen said. "From his side of the story. That's the part people need to hear." Dana looked at him carefully. "You're really not going back, are you? To formal practice?" He shook his head. "Not like before. You could be on any board, in any hospital." "I already am, just not the way they expect." She let out a slow breath. "You're hard to categorize, you know?" "Good. That means I'm not shrinking to fit." They both smiled. When Owen returned to room 217, Lila was asleep. Her breathing was slow but peaceful, the machines humming in gentle cadence. On the bedside table sat a small, unwrapped package with a sticky note that read, "For when the dance gets serious." Inside was a new plunger, bright blue, handle engraved with one word, Dad. He traced the letters with his thumb, then leaned back in the chair beside her and closed his eyes. Not to rest, just to be there, just to show up. The next day, the mentorship program expanded. Owen's curriculum was now available hospital-wide, integrated into orientation packets, staff debriefs, and even community outreach seminars. He led some in person, others through recorded stories, always without the coat, always with a mop nearby. One of the newer residents, a sharp-eyed woman from out of state, caught up to him in the hall. Owen, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What do you do when nobody notices what you're trying to do?" He paused. "You keep doing it anyway. But how do you know it's working?" He smiled gently. "You'll know the day someone shows up without being told. That's when it's working." She wrote that down. That Friday, Max returned with his sketch pad. He asked to visit Lila, who was still in light recovery, and brought her a framed version of his latest drawing. This one showed two hands, one holding a mop, the other a child's hand. No faces, no titles, just connection. Lila cried when she saw it. Owen stood back and watched them both. Later, after Max left, Lila looked up and asked, "Do you think I can do something like you? Help people, even if I don't have everything working?" He knelt beside her. "You already are. How?" "You ask questions. You care. You make people feel seen. That's more than most people learn in a lifetime." She nodded. "Okay." Then she leaned in and whispered, "When I get better, let's dance again." "We will." He promised it with everything he had. Because presence wasn't just about showing up. It was about staying, especially when it was hardest. Spring came late that year. The trees outside the pediatric wing bloomed slower than usual, their branches still bare against the gray sky. But inside room 217, the air was lighter. Lila sat up by the window, bundled in a soft blue blanket, a crayon in one hand and a small notebook in her lap. Her fourth pole stood beside her like an old friend. Owen sat nearby, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. He looked older than when he arrived at the hospital. Not from time, but from everything time had pulled through him. "You should wear the coat today," Lila said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. "Why today?" "Because it's the end of the story." He looked down at the coat folded across his lap, still spotless, still uncreased. He'd never worn it. She gave him a tiny smirk. "Come on, just once, for me." He sighed, then stood and carefully slid his arms into the sleeves. The fabric fit perfectly, as if it had waited all this time for permission. "How do I look?" "Like my dad," she said, plus a little sparkle. That afternoon, the hospital held a final walkthrough of the presence wing before opening to long-term patients. Dana stood at the front, clipboard in hand, running last checks with logistics. Ray coordinated the first group of visiting families. Max trailed behind his mom with a sketch pad tucked under one arm. Then came the murmur. Heads turned. Owen stepped into the lobby wearing the white coat. No announcement, no spotlight. But the silence that followed made it feel like the world had tilted. It wasn't just the coat. It was that he still wore his maintenance badge clipped to the waist. Still had his mop cart nearby. Still carried himself like the man who once danced with a plunger just to hear his daughter laugh. He wasn't replacing one identity with another. He was holding both. Dana approached him slowly, as if interrupting would ruin something delicate. "You came." "I was already here." She gave a small smile. "You're a hard man to define." "That's the idea." Ray joined them, holding a tablet. "The mentorship program has been approved for regional rollout. Other hospitals want the template. They're calling it the Hale method." Owen winced. "That sounds heavy." "They're already using it," Ray said, "but you can call it whatever you want." He looked past them, toward the families entering the new wing. Tired parents, wide-eyed children, uncertain footsteps. Some paused to read the sign at the entrance. Others walked straight in, searching for relief. In that moment, it was enough. Max handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a page torn from his sketch pad. A final drawing. It showed two figures, one tall, one small, walking down a hallway. The tall one had a mop in one hand and a doctor's coat trailing behind like a cape. The smaller one had wings, and between them, a single word: presence. Owen folded the drawing and placed it in his coat pocket, close to his heart. Then he turned, walked back down the corridor, and rejoined his daughter. Because in every way that mattered, that was still his shift. And he wasn't done showing up. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Single dad janitor let her cover his cart in stickers. The billionaire mom saw it and cried in the stairwell. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?